Well, hi again. The purpose of this video is to give you a little bit more background information on the end of the semester project, which is the culmination of what you've been working on all along. The weekly topics and the discussion boards have been designed to give you an overview of a lot of different kinds of things that HR might be asked to be involved in, and maybe to spur some thoughts about what you might be able to do in terms of this project. In the syllabus video at the beginning of the semester, and then again in the professional paper video, and again in the issues paper, I kind of alluded to the process that we're trying to accomplish here. The first step of the three-step process, which was the professional paper, was designed to give you a little bit of a connection with an HR person, to give you a relationship that you are to build upon in order to find an idea or an issue in a real company that you could become a consultant and try to address for that company. The issue paper then took that issue that the HR professional told you about and gave you a little bit of an opportunity to do some background research in HRM to find out what's going on in the world around that issue and what folks are writing about it, as folks are dealing with that in their organizations, what they're doing to solve that problem, to give you several different ideas to create a frame of reference, with the goal being that in this third part of the three-part project, you're actually preparing and will be prepared to give a presentation to senior management on how we're going to address this problem. In order to do that, you've got to be able to take that idea that the professional gave you at the end of that professional paper and that you researched in that issue paper and come up with the general statement that you're going to see in the Dropbox for the project. And that is this, and this is what I need you to be able to get real specific on to help guide you. It's kind of like the theme, the topic statement of your term paper, if this was a term paper. Here's the statement. The CEO called HR yesterday to say that he has been hearing that our company has a problem with blank and has asked HR to come up with a plan to address it. Okay, again, that's in the folder with the directions for the project, but again, the CEO contacted HR yesterday to say that he's been hearing that our company has a problem with blank, and he has tasked HR with coming up with a plan to address it. Now, your job is to fill in that blank, and it needs to be fairly specific. You don't want to have something that is real generic. In the real world, maybe the CEO would task HR with coming up with a plan to create job descriptions. But for this project, you want to be able to be specific enough to where that you can really attack it in a short presentation with maybe one department or with one job. If the issue is that we need performance appraisals, the task for this project is too big to say we're going to create a performance appraisal system or we're going to create a tool to use in our performance appraisals. What you might do in this project is to say we're going to create a performance appraisal tool for one job, with the understanding that if we can get it to work for one job, we can tweak it for every other job in the organization. Or if we need job descriptions because there's some confusion as to who's responsible for what kinds of tasks, you don't want as your project to create job descriptions for the company. No, you'll probably want as your project to create a job description for this particular job title, with the understanding that once you've gotten that template and you've got an idea of what goes into that template, it would then be pretty easy to create a job description for any other job in the company. You may have a situation where we've heard that our company has a problem with skyrocketing insurance premiums, and we need to find a plan to address it. And maybe the plan to address it is that we create the first steps of a wellness program, or maybe we create a policy to deal with smoking or tobacco on premises or something. But you want to make sure that it is very, very much an HR issue. Another example, the problem may be that we're not getting good folks to apply for our jobs, or we're looking to expand to a new market, and we need to hire a whole bunch of people. The issue may be, from an HR perspective, that we need to find a way to get the right people to apply. That's an HR issue, which is the sourcing part of it. Or we need to have a really defined step-by-step checklist kind of process to get us through all these applications to a hire quickly. That's an HR process. And it's got to be something specific like that. So what I want you to do is, between now and maybe a week or so from now, is to really narrow down what that topic is. And it'll probably help you if you will send me an email that kind of has that statement in it. The CEO contacted HR yesterday to say that he's been hearing that our company has a problem with blank. You fill in that blank with recruiting the right kinds of people, or keeping people longer than a year, or giving them adequate training to get up to speed within the first 90 days, or something that is very, very specific. And he's tasked HR with coming up with a plan to address it. When you give me that statement, I can give you some feedback. That's way too broad, or you know what, that's not really an HR issue, that's more of an operations issue. We had somebody in the past that tried to do a project where they wanted to decide between one of two sites to open up a warehouse, and how to staff that site with a competitor in the area who already had a lot of the best qualified people. And unfortunately, what she did in her project was to really narrow down which of two different locations. And that's not really what they would come to HR to ask. What they would come to HR to ask is, whichever location we go to, what's the plan we need to attract people to come and apply for our jobs? That would be the HR issue, not where do we locate the plant. So make sure that it is very, very specifically something HR would be asked to do. And you may be kind of borderline on that, and running it by me, I could help you to refine it to where it is an HR issue. But it also not only needs to be an HR issue, it needs to be something that is pretty fairly narrow. If you have something that's too big, you can't accomplish it in one project. Had somebody else one time that indicated that the issue was that people's morale was low. And her solution, which is fairly much an HR issue, but it's very, very broad. And as she was defining what she was going to do to address the low morale, she talked about changing the way they hire, and screening for these kinds of personalities, and having a better orientation system, and improving their pay, and giving them a little more vacation time. And yeah, all of those things would help to improve morale, but that's way too big for what we're trying to do here. Maybe the issue is morale, but what you're going to propose is one little sliver of that pie to make it reasonable for this. And what I want you to be able to do by the end of the semester, during the week when we have the projects, is in 7.5 to 8.5 minutes. I'm targeting 8, but I'm going to give you just a little bit of a gap on either side. So 7.5 to 8.5 minutes to be able to tell our CEO what you think the solution to this problem is. And you're going to want to be able to tell him or her what we're going to do to address it, what the steps are in the process, what the critical checkpoints are, who's responsible for it, who's going to have accountability for it, what it's going to cost, what it's going to bring in terms of a return, a payback, return on investment, all those kinds of things. So the good proposal is going to be one that talks about not only what we're doing, but maybe a little bit of justification as to why this is the best answer. But it also talks about the financial part of it. It talks about the personnel part of it. It talks about the strategic part of it. It talks about the logistical part of it, with the time flow and the accountability, all that kind of stuff. And all that is within 7.5 to 8.5 minutes. So you got to be able to really get to it quickly, hit the main points, answer the questions that the CEO would have, and get out of it. Attached to the Dropbox where the instructions are a couple of things. There'll be a link in there where you can go to a doodle poll and sign up for the day that you want to present this. And as I look at my calendar, we're going to do 4 on Monday, November 28th. That's right after Thanksgiving. 4 on Tuesday, the 29th. 4 on Wednesday, the 30th. And then 4 on Thursday the 1st. And then we will take the weekend off. We'll do 4 more on Monday, December 5th, 4 more on Tuesday, December the 6th, and then the rest of them on Wednesday, December the 7th. And depending on how many people we still have in the class after withdrawals and things like that, we may adjust a little bit the last 2 days to where it's 3 a day or something like that. Now, I got to get grades in for any of you who are graduating kind of early. So I'm going to ask you, some of you will want to go the first day and get it over with, and that's cool. But I'm going to ask you, if you're not set to graduate in the middle of December of this year, that you let the first 2 days, maybe the first 3 days, stay open for people who are graduating. That gives me a little bit more time to get their grades ready. If you're not graduating yet, I don't have to have your grades in for several more days. Senior grades, graduating grades are due on Thursday, December the 8th, and other grades are due like Monday or Tuesday of the next week. So I have an extra 3 or 4 days for those of you who aren't graduating. So out of courtesy, let me get you to, when you do your doodle poll sign-ups, 4 per day. If you're not graduating, start looking at either the Wednesday or the Thursday of the first week, or Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday of the second week. And right now, you'll just be signing up for one of 4 slots on a day. Once we have those 4 names, we'll start talking amongst the subset of us who's going to go in what order. So you'll know exactly what time you're going to present. They will be, I think I set it up to where they're like 9 to 10 or something like that. I'll confirm that. But you'll be given 15 minutes. And 7.5 to 8.5 of it is for you to make the presentation. We're going to have a guest CEO. It's not going to be me, who is going to be studying your presentation for the logic of it. And these are going to be people who are in HR who have to make these kinds of presentations to senior management. And they're going to be thinking about your presentation from the perspective of what the CEO would be thinking about if they were making the presentation. And I'm going to challenge our guest CEOs to come up with 2 questions that they can ask you. And I have no idea what they're going to be. It's going to depend on what your presentation is. They're going to ask you 2 questions about things that they think are missing from your presentation that the CEO or the CFO or one of those kinds of people, COO, are going to be wanting to know to be able to say yes or no. Part of your grade is going to depend on how well you answer those questions. And the harder you make it for them to come up with questions, the better you're going to do overall, because you've already addressed all of the main things. So attached to the Dropbox, or in a link within the Dropbox, is to sign up for the time or the day that you want. Attached to the Dropbox is a copy of the grading rubric, and I'm going to be looking at that as I talk through that real quick. Again, the overall idea is that you're going to tell the CEO and senior management how we're going to address this problem that he's been hearing about, that he wants to get off of his to-do list. Of the overall project, 60% of it deals with how well you address the issue and lay out a good plan to deal with it. And 40% deals with how, not the content of it, but the quality of how you do it. And you can pull up this rubric. You can print the rubric off if you want to pause the video if you haven't already done it, but I'm going to talk through real quick what the major components are. The first component is that we're going to look at the issue. And it's worth up to 10 points. 10 points if it is very clearly an HR thing and it's narrow enough to be able to do in this time frame. 9 points if it is very clearly HR but it's a little bit too broad. There's too many pieces of it. 8 points if it is not clearly HR. It may be kind of HR and kind of not, but it is narrow. And then 7 points if it's neither clearly HR nor broad, narrow if it's broad. All right, so the worst you'll do, if you at least do a presentation, it's going to be a 7 on that. And if you give me your idea beforehand, more likely it's going to either be a 9 or a 10. The second thing is whether the proposal is logical or not. At the end of it, I'm going to think back and I'm going to go, did it make sense what they were trying to do? You'll get 5 points on that. If it's logical, it made sense, what we were going to do, how we were going to do it. You'll get 3 points if it was going pretty good at times, but there were chunks of it that didn't really make a lot of sense. And no points if I really got lost in it and never really understood what you were trying to do. So 5, 3, or 0. Then there's 35 points at stake on the analysis that you're doing. And that includes the things like the financial parts of it, the return on investment, the cost, the benefits, all the intangibles. You'll get a 35 out of 35 if you've answered all the questions. It's very clear based upon what you told me how to proceed. And it doesn't necessarily require a yes answer. It may be that that's a great plan, you've answered all the questions, but it just doesn't seem like now's the right time. That doesn't work in your disadvantage if you've done a good job presenting this thing. 32 points. If you've done a really good job of it, but there's a detail or two missing here or there. But still, it's fairly clear, pending those couple of answers, how we're going to proceed. 28 points, if it's kind of 50-50, you left out a lot of important stuff, and I'm not sure how we would go from here. 25 points, if you've missed so much of it that I would have to say, you know what, we're going to have to put this on the table for a while until you do some more research. So 25 out of 35 really is the worst that you can do on this. Then 10 points based upon the logistics. And the logistics deal with things like the timeline, the accountability, who's supposed to do it, what we would say the mile markers are. If you were to lay this thing out by October, we've got to do this, by December this, by January or June or whatever, we should be able to see this thing implemented and functional within the next year, that kind of stuff. So 10 points if it's very, very clear. I know who's going to do it, who's going to be held accountable, when they're going to do it, so forth. 9 points if there's a little bit of a gap there. 8 points if you're really starting to get vague in terms of what these things are and how we're going to lay this thing out on a calendar. 7 points if there's just too many holes in it. And in this case, 5 points if we would walk out of this meeting going, I haven't got the foggiest idea of what he or she proposed and how we would even begin to do this next. All right, so that comes up to 60 points of the overall project, just in the details of what you give us. The other 40 points is really kind of what we would say style related. And I'm trying to toggle between a couple of screens here, and I may have just opened up a folder here that's going to create problems. I hope that I didn't. It looks like I'm still good. All right. As I said, our guest CEO is going to be challenged by me to find 2 questions. Now, there may be lots and lots and lots of holes, and if that's the case, they're going to pick the 2 most important questions. So you can be pretty assured that you won't get more than 2 questions. And those 2 questions, if you've done a great job, may be very general, stupid kind of questions, but they're going to ask you 2 questions just to give you a chance to respond. Think on your feet and respond. They may be very, very difficult questions, and you may kind of flip through your notes and go, I haven't got the foggiest idea and thought about that. We're going to see how you think on your feet, like you would have to do if you were really making a presentation to senior management. 10 points if you do an excellent job, 9 points if you do a great job, 8 is a good job, 7 is a poor job, 5 points is really bad. The answers that you gave really don't seem to have anything to do with the questions that were asked. Then the time is a critical part of this. Generally speaking, in a senior management meeting, there's an agenda of items. We don't want to meet for more than an hour and a half or 2 hours, so each item on this agenda might only have 8 or 10 minutes worth of time allocated to it. We can't spend 30 minutes talking about your issue. So how well can you get to the meat of the problem and tell us what we need to know to resolve this thing, to make it a detail. So I'm going to have a stopwatch running when you start. I'm going to let you start when you feel like it. I'm going to hit go. I'm going to let it run for a second or 2 after I think you're done before I turn it off. So you get the benefit of the doubt on the time. But you're going to get 10 points if that presentation is between 7.5 and 8.5 minutes. You're going to lose a point for each 30 seconds on either side. So if it's 7 to 7.5, you've lost a point. If it's 8.5 to 9, you've lost a point. It's only 8 points if it's a minute short or a minute long. It's 7 points if it's a minute and a half short, and so forth. 10, 9, 8, 7, or 4. If your presentation is less than 6 minutes or it's more than 10 minutes, it's only going to be 4 points out of 10 because you haven't really compacted it, stayed on track, told us what we need to know in the time that you have. Now, it's going to be helpful to you if you have some sort of a little timer going to keep up with it, but I'm going to encourage you, if you're finding yourself getting to the end of your presentation and you're at 5 or 6 minutes, don't just blabber to kill time like I do in some of these videos. You need to have practiced this thing enough to where you can get through your major notes and answer the most important questions and leave the less important things to drop off if you run out of time. But don't try to extend it to make sure that you're in the time frame. Just have that as a frame of reference so that you kind of know if you're in the ballpark. All right. Then there's 10 points at stake based upon your style. And I'm going to be looking for things because I'm not having to think about the content so much to ask the questions because our guest CEO is doing that. I'm going to be looking to see whether you're looking at the camera a lot or if you're looking down at your notes a lot. If you are making a presentation that seems to be fairly relaxed, I know you're going to be a little bit jittery. I'll factor that in. But for the most part, do you look like you're kind of poised? Are you certain about what you're talking about, or does it appear that you're kind of making this thing up as you're going along, or you're kind of backtracking because you're saying things that are contradictory? Does your voice seem to be pretty strong? Is it kind of hard to hear you? That goes back a little bit to confidence level. Does it seem to flow well from start to finish? All 5 of those things shouldn't be real hard to do, and that's worth 10 points. If you're missing one of them, it's 9. If you're missing 2, it's 8. If you're missing 3, it's 7. If you only have one of them or none of them, it's only 2 points. And then the last thing that we're going to do, the CEO is going to think critically about your presentation. As I have said a couple of times, the CEO is going to ask you 2 questions. No more, but no less. He or she will ask you 2 questions of some shape, form, or fashion about the presentation that you just made. When it's done, the CEO person is going to email me with each of your names, each of the 4 of you who are doing presentations that night that he or she will have listened to. And for each of you individually, the CEO is going to say, perfect, A, B, or C, based upon how well he thinks that presentation would have worked if he or she were delivering it to his or her senior management. And that's worth up to 10 points. If he or she says, that was a perfect presentation, you're going to get 10 points for that. If it's an A presentation, it's pretty darn good. There's just little moderate things here and there that are missing. You'll probably get 9 points for an A. If he or she says, it's a B, that's going to be 8 points. And if he or she says, probably wouldn't pass it, you're going to get 7. You're going to get at least 7 for doing it. So all that totals up to 100 points. And I'm going to be sitting there with a printed copy of this with your name on it. I'm going to be making little dots and notes and circling things. And when you get done with this thing, that evening or the next day, I'm going to ask you to submit the Dropbox. And all you got to do is say done. I'll go in, I'll plug in the numbers to the matrix, the rubric, and I'll submit it, and you'll have points on this thing. You got 8 out of 10 on this, you got 32 out of 40 on that, whatever the case is. 7 out of 10, 10 out of 10, whatnot, and your grand total is this. It's going to be a little bit stressful trying to figure out how to get all the stuff you need into 7.5 to 8.5 minutes, how to rehearse it enough to where you know what you're doing with enough confidence to where you can actually deliver this thing in the time frame. But even if you do a great job delivering it in the time frame, there's the wild card of not knowing what the question is that the CEO is going to ask, and how well do you analyze that, sort through the information in your head, pull back from your recollection of what you've studied, and answer that question in a logical, legitimate manner. My goal is that your presentation and the time it takes to answer 2 questions is 15 minutes at the very most, and I'm hoping that it's 10 minutes or 12 minutes, and that we can start on the next person in the sequence right afterwards. So it's going to take less than an hour to do all 4 presentations. If things are very succinct and quick, it may only take 40 or 45 minutes to do 4 presentations, and then you're done. Once you've done your presentation, realistically, other than I don't even think there is a final in this exam, in this class, I think realistically, once you have done this presentation, I got to go back and check that too. Now I'm questioning myself. If there's a final exam, that's all that's left. So if you are one of the first day or 2, you're pretty much done with the class a week early. If you wait and want to be one of the last ones, you'll have a couple of things happening the last couple of days of class. But I'll encourage you. The more confident you are, the better you're going to do, the better it's going to flow. So practice, figure out what you want to do, practice it a number of times. Now the question certainly is going to come up, do you need to have a PowerPoint or anything like that? And I'm going to say that no, you don't. If it helps you to create one that you can have on the table in front of you to look at as you're talking, that would be the equivalent of note cards. If you want to have note cards or a PowerPoint for your reference, go for it. Anything that can help you get to the main points, get through the thing, and get done with it in the time frame that's allotted is perfect, but I don't need to see it. The only thing that I would say I might need to see, or that the CEO might need to see, is if there's something that gets very, very detailed, like numbers can do at times. If you're kind of building into your project a series of calculations that come to a final cost or a final benefit, and you think that talking through this, we're going to get lost, we need to be able to see the numbers, then by all means, email me something ahead of time that I can share with our CEO so that we can look it up. You can say that the sheet that I provided you has got these numbers that I'm referencing, and we can kind of follow you through it to create less of an opportunity for confusion on our part. But again, you don't have to do that. If you think it'd be helpful, send it to me, email it to me. You don't want to put anything in your Dropbox until you're done. So if there's anything you want me to have access to during the presentation, email it to me ahead of time. And then I will make a decision as to whether the CEO needs to see this or not. I'm going to tell the CEO, whoever it is, who the 4 people are who are presenting, and I'm going to give them the basic statement that you gave me, that you answered. The CEO contacted HR yesterday to say that he's been hearing that our company has a problem with blank. So the CEO will know generally what the topic is. And then he or she will be able to focus on, did you give me enough information to be able to address that topic, or at least a specific piece of that topic. Hopefully that's the most of what you need to be able to make good progress on this thing. So you'll need to be looking for the Dropbox, where you've got the instructions printed out, where you've got the link to the doodle poll, and where you've got the rubric. If you have questions, either send me an email or give me a call, text me, put a note out there on the group class discussion board, Ask Dr. Grimes. If you send me an email, I think it's something that everybody would have an interest in. I'll put something out there on that big discussion board for everybody to see. Otherwise, we'll just kind of work one-on-one as you share me your ideas with me. And again, I'm going to encourage you, once you really think you've narrowed down what this topic is that you're going to present a solution for, I really will encourage you. It certainly doesn't hurt your grade if you don't. It could very significantly help your grade if you do. But I'm going to encourage you to send me an email with that statement and the blank filled in so that I can at least look at it and say, I think you're off track. I don't think this is HR. I don't think it's specific enough. Or, yeah, I think you're perfect where you are. And that is understanding the 10 points of it is that it is HR and it's narrow. If you'll give me that information ahead of time, I can probably help you get all 10 points on that. Again, if you have questions, email me, put a post out there on the discussion board, and we'll try to address it. Otherwise, I hope that this answers a lot of your questions, and I'll record another video if I need to. Otherwise, I'm looking forward to hearing your projects and to see how well you've been able to get familiar with HRM to be able to solve these kinds of problems. And if you're in HR, this may be something you do every day when the senior management meets, so you're comfortable with this. If you're not in HR, maybe it'll give you a real appreciation for what HR needs to be able to do to fight for the company, to fight for the people, to make the workplace a better place for you. All right, good luck with it.